everybody. It's so great to see such a big crowd here, and I bet you're all as enthused as I am to learn more about the history of Frederick. Emily's going to put on our talk, but Emily, if you were aware of it, had been working at Frederick Living for 18 years. She's currently our director of residential living, but she's been here a long time. She was from Royersforge, that's where she grew up, and she went to Springford School District. She went to college at Juniata in Huntington and got her Bachelor of Arts degree in history, specializing in American history, 20th century American history. She loves to travel, she likes to read. She and her husband Adam and her two sons Jacob and Ryan love being out in the outdoors, and she is just a really ball of fire as far as I'm concerned. So instead of keep talking, I'll turn it over to Emily.
Wow, this is such a nice crowd, and I am so excited to have the opportunity to talk to you today about Frederick Living's history. So just to give you a little bit of background, I've always loved history and storytelling, particularly stories about whether it's buildings, time, but mostly people as well. So today I'm going to take you on a journey kind of both. We're going to look at how Frederick Living has changed both physically, the structures and the building projects through the years, but more so I have some stories to tell you. Some of the individuals are here today or families of loved ones, and I wanted to start out by saying I couldn't capture every story, and I know you know that, but there were so many stories to pick from, so we'll be highlighting just a few today, and know that there are also a lot more stories. So I kind of stopped the storytelling around the 80s. So if you like the presentation, you feel like we should do a little bit more research, we still have another 45 years to kind of go through. So what is it? I had to kind of keep it to an hour. So we're going to get rolling. All right. So how did Frederick Living come to be? So many of you know that Reverend Nathaniel B. Grubb, so N.B. Grubb, is known as the founder of Frederick Living. And so when I was digging into the original story of how this happened, I wanted to learn a little bit more about N.B. Grubb. So just a little bit about the history. I'm going to show you him. There he is. N.B. was actually born here in Frederick, Pennsylvania. And he was known to have a limitless amount of energy and a very strong conviction in his faith. He was the pastor of a large First Mennonite church in Philadelphia, and he was described as being a person of practical Christianity, kind words and deeds, very unselfish, had a lot of integrity. And just to give you an idea of his limitless energy, he was giving sermons and active in the church until his 86th year. He gave over 7,000 sermons. So I was like, oh, this is just getting interesting from the start, because Nathaniel, or NB, I'll stick with NB, he was told by the Eastern Conference, the Mennonite Eastern Conference, hey, we want you to come up with a plan to help retired pastors and older adults. Where will they go? We want you to come up with a plan, bring it to the board, and tell us what we should do to have them make sure they have housing or cared for later in life. And so, as often happens, works really hard on this plan, and he takes it to the board, and he gives it to the board, and the board says, I don't think so. We need to go back and work on it a little more. Now we know NB is convicted that I got to get this done for the older adults and the pastors. And so he decides that, okay, plan one didn't work. I was rejected from the board, but I still want to get this done. So he goes out and buys what was the Frederick Institute. That's the building, the original building. Frederick Institute used to be a day school during prior to the Civil War period for young men as they went to the Civil War. That school no longer existed, and so it just had the building left. So it was up for sale, and so Ebby goes and gets it. He purchases the property of Frederick, the former Frederick Institute, for $1,150. And then he goes back to that board and says, hey, I got another plan. I happen to have this land and building, the Frederick Institute, and I think you guys should use this for the ministers and the older adults of the community. And they said, that's a great idea. So I love that. I often was thinking about it and thinking, I wondered if this man had just given up on that first try once he started rejecting. But he went around the loop. So he got the land, and for $1,150, Frederick Living started. So this is the building, just so you know. This is the building as it was when we first purchased it. It's an incredible picture because you're going to still see a lot of the framework throughout. And so that's what it looked like. And it was called the Mennonite Home of the Aged. Now, I recently saw that Souderton was called the Old People's Home back then. So I'm not sure which is better, to be called the Home of the Aged or the Old People's Home. I'm glad we don't use that terminology anymore. But we officially opened September 1st, 1986. 1896. That's okay. I thank you. Don't forget to correct me like that one. So 1896. All right. So just a couple things about opening day. The first year, there was a superintendent and a matron and 5 inmates. It's a tough word. We don't use that anymore. 5 inmates, or 5 residents. And the one thing that Frederick was always from the beginning was that they were very much interdenominational. So it wasn't just that they were serving Mennonites. They would also serve really anyone. Lutheran, Quaker, Church of the Brethren, Church of Christ. You see that across the board. So from the very beginning, there were people from different denominations at Frederick. This picture here is dated around 1905. Kind of see, we've got the porch going now. It's a beautiful porch. I was kind of thinking I'd like to live there. Do you like the little tower at top? Yeah. And then we've got 1910. So the pastor with the child there, he was from the district and he came to visit. And we have some of the residents sitting on the steps as well. And you can see the sign, Mennonite Home for the Aged. So just a little bit more about that. Electricity was not at Frederick when it opened. Electricity, we started to get wired for electricity here around 1915. So just an idea of when we started to get that. And then in 1928, it had its first kind of renovation. They added 24 rooms to what's called a south wing, and we'll see that a little bit in the pictures as we go on. In addition, by 1933, they had served, 1916, they had already served about 70 older adults. So you think about that, the numbers start to grow pretty rapidly as we're moving forward, which leads to the expansion. So here we're going to skip a little bit to 1956, 1957, and this is when the big construction, one of the first big constructions took place. Magnolia House West, which we know to be this side of Magnolia, was constructed during that time, and included also some renovations to the main building. So you can see that. See how they were building it back then? So we're 1957. We have the west area. We have that addition. Yep. So, don't you love the road going up there? I don't have all the answers of when that was built or how it disappeared, but I think it was built right around this 1957 time when I was kind of documenting the history. It was big news for the kitchen around this time, too. We got our first stainless steel kitchen, and then the dining room was added as well. So this was a very much a major renovation for Frederick. And this is where some of our stories start. So a name that came up quite often when I was doing research was Levi Beeler. And so Frederick was a community that the Mennonite tradition was one of pacifists. And they would look for opportunities to sometimes do alternative service to the military. And Levi was a 1W that came to Frederick living. And what I learned from some of the research I did was that he worked in maintenance. He really enjoyed it. Check out that machinery. I believe that mower at the time was top-notch, like top of the line. So that's pretty good. This is late 1950s. But one of the best things I read about was that he was excellent at cutting good steak and roast. But as you delved into it, I found that his steak and roast were brought by the deer warden or the game warden. So each day at Frederick living around this time, they'd go and collect the dead animals on the road and the deer, and they would drop them off at Frederick. And yes, Levi could make it taste pretty tasty. Now, I was recently at a meeting of managers, and I said, I'm going to be doing this history, and I have to tell you a story. They used to drop all the dead deer off, and they'd eat it for dinner. And the individual, the team member said, do you know when that practice stopped? I said, I have no hard evidence it has. So, anyways, I love that picture. We're going to talk about, I see one of the residents I'm going to talk about later, Blake. He's also in a video here going to talk about how they cubed and diced and all the fun stuff. So I just love that, though. It shows you how much changed. So a little bit more about Levi. So he worked there as a 1W, and then he left for a while. And the researcher said he did some excavating work. And then the administrator at the time, Larry Smith, Marlene Smith's husband, which we'll get to her too, but Larry Smith calls up Levi and says, hey, I have an open position as a manager. So Levi comes back, and for the next 30 years serves as the maintenance supervisor for the next 30 years. He was married to his wife, Nellie, who had 5 kids. And back then, it was very common to just have your kids around, like campus. Like, I bring mine in once in a while, but it's more common that they kind of were part of life around here. And so that's a picture of Levi as manager. And then the story continues because Levi also was cared for most recently here at Frederick, living during the end of his life. He just passed away this year and was one of our residents in skilled nursing. So if you look at that history, that's how Frederick is interwoven from 18 years old or so and up. We see that longevity and that commitment to service. So I kind of just loved, also love looking at the pictures from back then, taking temperatures, fixing things. So, and also how people change. But he looks, you can see Levi in there. So Levi was good friends with Blake. Do you want to give a little wave? There he is. We have somebody famous in the room. So, sharing the story about Blake and Ethel. And Ethel is here as well today, Blake's wife. So Blake was also a 1W, volunteer at Frederick Living. He was raised in the mountains of West Virginia, and when he came to Frederick, it was like a whole new world, he said, because we actually had sinks and bathtubs here, which they did not have in West Virginia. We had hot and cold water as well. And he loved to serve the residents in any way he could. He was from maintenance worker to serving meals. He got groceries. He washed dishes. He helped bathe and shave male residents. And to many residents here, he was like an adopted son to them. He was very much beloved and is beloved. I like this story of him getting on the snowmobiles to go pick up staff from work. There's no excuse not to be work on a snow day, because Blake would come and get you, and you would go on the snowmobile to go get him. Also, he was known as like the protector of the ground. So we'll talk about anniversary days in a little bit, but he would sleep outside, sometimes on the concrete pavement once the anniversary tents were up in September, to protect the grounds and the tents and make sure there's no shady business going on. And then he'd wake up and get back to work. Blake worked here from 1961 to 2002. So I got a long way to go, Blake, to catch up with that. Only at 18. And after that, he even came back part-time. And Ethel, you got her a job here too, or you got yourself a job here, huh? Ethel working, and she worked here from 1964 to 2004. So just a lifetime commitment. And Blake also became the manager of laundry and housekeeping. So I just want to share a video clip that was made about 5 years ago of Blake. He begins by sharing some of the stories, because he was also good at cutting up those dead deer. So it kind of begins at that point, but there's a lot more to the story. So we'll take a moment, and I'll get that set up.
Out here. And of course, as a mason die, we had to cut them up, make hamburger, and the roast is sent away and made roast out of them. I came in one Monday morning, and there were 5 deer in the refrigerator waiting for me. So you just had to keep very busy. And I helped the male residents with the shaving, and also help them with their baths, you know. And most of the time, men don't like showers. They like a tub bath. I learned that. And of course, the Lord gave me my beautiful wife. She's from Sipak area, and we got married. And an amazing thing, at our wedding, I made 2 rows in the front of the church for the people from Frederick to sit, to come to my wedding. It was wonderful. And of course, my wife says, I'm supposed to find you a job at Frederick. And she did. So she worked in dining service, but she made out very wonderful. She became a great employee at Frederick here. Well, the anniversary day, I worked a lot out in the flea market. I used to sleep out there on the blacktop, so everything would be okay. But I had to come in and do my other work as well. See, I had to dry mop the hallways, I had to wet mop the hallways, I had to do all that, do the bathrooms. I had to do all that. I remember we had to mow yard and everything. People don't realize how much yard we had to mow. And the shrubbery. I had a man that came in, and he seen I was having a problem with the shrubbery. You know, if you know what you're doing, it don't go too easy. He's told me what to do. He showed it to me. I had no problem. Man, I really made the shrubbery fly then. Beautiful stuff. Well, I had a wonderful staff. You make your staff, you know. The way you walk and treat your staff, it makes them what they are and what they will be, you know. And I had a wonderful staff, dedicated staff. They were very honest with me, and they respected me. We had a meeting once a month when they could come and bring the problems, the concerns to throw it out, so we could talk about it. We got to bring things out so everybody knows what's going on. And that was wonderful. That was wonderful. I didn't keep my time, really. You know, to me, it was not really a job to get paid for. It was a job of what I wanted to really do. And I remember my farewell party here. It took 3 hours for the residents to come up and say goodbye to me. And I remember this lady very well, coming up in a wheelchair, slowly and slowly. She looked up and almost tears in her eyes. She said, Blake, I would love to give you a hug, but I can't reach you. I said, I'll come down to you. So I fell to my knees, and she gave me a big hug. What a reward. Money can't buy that. Frederick's a wonderful place. Look at me. It's marvelous.
Blake and Ethel are here today, but Blake, I actually have that video. For some reason, it just did the audio, but yeah, that's just a beautiful story of someone who gave an incredible commitment to this community. Again, I was seeing that a lot, like people dedicating their service and their time for long periods of time, this faith that, hey, we are here to serve one another and be part of a community, and kind of living their lives like right in this area and being part of that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I love listening to that story. Okay, so another big part of Frederick Living history was its anniversary day. So we know September is Frederick Living's anniversary month. And back then, it was also, they had names like the Country Fair, they would call it, or Anniversary Day was the main one. That began in 1897. So what you could expect was these really large tents. Look at that one at top, how big those tents are that were set up. They would have quilting auctions here. They would have other fundraising. They would bring in a well-known speaker. They made almost about 700 pounds of roast beef. And I was checking the prices out. They looked pretty good back then. In 1933, you could come to the anniversary day, get a full meal for 35 cents. And I was pretty excited about that and realized probably a little more expensive day. And then, well, actually, not. I have to clarify that to get my facts right. The charge in 1914 was 35 cents, but there was a 15-cent increase by 1933 to 50 cents. So it was a great way to build community, but it was also a fundraising opportunity. There were a lot of capital improvements, so building projects or just things that need to be taken care of in the community. And so the community would come out. A lot of it was members of the Eastern District Conference to come support the community, and it was really fun. When I first started here, we did have some anniversary day celebrations on a smaller scale, and it was just a really cool event. So when I was doing the research, you can see how big an event it was. And just a quote from the 1914 14 one, it says, the charge of dinner tickets has officially advanced to 35 cents. A large canvas was stretched to provide shelter. The East Greenville Orchestra discoursed excellent music, and this greatly enhanced the pleasure of the occasion. So it was just a big event, I was learning. The other thing I found fun in the research was that I kind of thought, boy, even though these pictures are really older, they remind me of the things we do today as a community, right? If you kind of look at them, that top one there is a ceramics class. We used to have some like a kiln and things, but think about the art classes we have. So that was a well-attended. This was the old chapel. You can see everyone singing, crowded in. Still do that today, huh? About 50, 60 years ago. Bus trips. There's the bus from back then. And did you know we had like a really old gift shop too? I learned that in my research, though. The gift shop has been part of Frederick for a long time. I like this one too. This is a picture I found of the residents going out to a picnic at Green Lane Park. So you can we still go out to picnics. Sometimes at Green Lane, or if you've been up there, you can see all the tables, the way it's built. Yeah, they're going out in a lot colder weather than there's some heavy coats and hats in there. All right. So Marlene's here today as well, and so we're going to tell a little bit about her and Larry's story. A little more focus on Marlene, but Larry is definitely a piece of that. So how did Marlene arrive at Frederick Living? Well, when I talked to her, she said she was originally working at Grandview Hospital when she received a call from Larry, the administrator, future husband, that maybe she should come out and try Frederick Living and come work for them. Her initial response was, I don't know. But she did think that Larry was an excellent listener and that he gave good advice. So she decided to give it a chance and came over to Frederick Living. That was around November 1965. So the big thing on campus was then over time, her and Larry, they started to date, and by Christmas time of 1966, they were married. Or 1966, they were engaged, and they married in March 1967. So I imagine this romance was a lot of fun to follow. Marlene, do you think people liked following the romance of you and the administrator? I was thinking that. I would need up. So if you think about Larry, her husband, started here in 1958, so he had been here about 7 years already when Marlene arrived on the scene. Here's some pictures of her. Look at that. Doing the eye drops. I love it. And her hard at work. So her and Larry had 2 children, and their son Don was born in 1968. And Deb, who I found out is here today, looking great, Deb, in that picture. You were born in 1970. There was also a dog on campus. See that little face between them? Sheba. Sheba was like the campus dog, I guess you could say. Back then, the administrator and family would live on campus. This house was built in 1954 for $17,000. So the administrator's job, they would be given this house and they would live on campus. Marlene remembers the first time when they got back from their honeymoon, or about that time, first time she tried to get in that house, Sheba was not letting her in. But after she called Larry, and Larry got Sheba under control, she was from then on able to get in the house. She spoke, Marlene, when I talked to her, spoke a lot about some of the changes in healthcare over time. So let's let's see. When she was working in her nursing role originally, they had a guy named Dr. Junker here. And how they would do medication was he would come into Frederick Living with a big black bag of medicine. He'd take out the packet of med that you need, and he would write your name on it, and that was your med. So while she was working here, a little bit after that time, they put a lot more procedures in place where the doctors could not just come in and give out medication. It had to go to a pharmacy. So that was when the big change took place. And her reflection is that was not an easy thing for Dr. Junker, because he was really used to the way that they had done medication distribution. But the big black bag was no longer welcome. In addition, she remembers we kind of talked about switching gears just slightly, but what's it like with having kids on campus? Well, the kids were really part of the community. Again, I talked about that. Levi had a number of children here, and then Don and Deb. There were rocking chair conversations. There was a resident named Hamus that Deb would have rocking chair conversations. I would love to have rocking chair conversations where you're just chit-chatting and talking about life. Don loved to play cards, but he stopped after a while. I thought some cheating was going on when he would play the residents in cards. She also remembered that memory support was not like it is today. It wasn't in existence, right? So as cognitive changes happen, you would kind of depend on the larger community outside of Frederick to help you. Remembers one time, one of the residents walked down the road and the neighbors would take them in, let Frederick know we have a resident. When they brought her back, she said, this place again. It wasn't uncommon for that to happen. Everyone was kind of looking out for each other. One of the big decisions that came about was the decision that as we were expanding, and when Marlene was here, they decided that they were going to open a skilled nursing unit on Frederick around 1971. Oh wait, I real quick want to show you a few pictures. This is Larry working, and I think his name is Mr. Shelley, former administrator. So, and this is Marlene's retirement. Marlene retired in 1998 from nursing, so very long career, and then worked in transportation a little bit as well. So that's a picture of her upon retirement. She also had a retirement party here. And then Larry and her came back to live here October 2013, and Larry passed in 2017. Just to give you a sense, we have that interwoven history, right? From young to growing up and getting older and raising families. So I just think they're really cool pictures. Okay, so a couple things. The decision was made that, hey, Frederick is expanding. We're taking on more people, and what was happening was, you see, let's go back just a second. There's a picture I want to show you. See this building here? This side? Okay. That side of the building ended up being for people that were really pretty sick. They were noticing residents living longer and aging longer, and they would shift them to that side. That's the infirmary, they would call it. And what happened over time was not really enough room or space to care for those that were very sick. And around that time, a lot of skilled nursing units were opening up. So the decision was made that we would open a 50-bed nursing unit. You can see it in the back. It's almost like a T shape, right? You got a wing, long back. You see the pond in the back? That pond's in a lot of the pictures. The cost per day for a semi-private room when it opened in 1971 was $17 a day. That's a pretty good price for full skilled nursing care. The cost of actually making it, when I read the story, was a little over $1 million at that time. It was shocking. So they had all the people in the room, the board, and when they pulled like the vendor, the bids, and they heard the $1 million numbers, there was like an audible gasp, because this was not something, that's a lot of money back then. And as a result, one of the good news was they got a substantial grant from to support the building of this, and were able to do it, which was great. So it opened as a 50-bed skilled nursing, and let's see, there I go. We have another former board member and resident here, Richard. Is that you talking? Richard Rosenberger right there. He did the dedication speech in 1971 of the skilled nursing. I love that picture. When I first saw it, I took a double take, because I'm like, oh, that's definitely him. We can see kind of what it looked like. That was the charting area when it first opened. We also have the state-of-the-art tubs. And about mid-70s, the physical therapy started to open up as well. We're going to listen to a clip from Richard. He's going to talk a little bit about the decision to open the skilled nursing, and just a little bit also about, at the end, you'll see he adds in about some structural changes too. All right, we'll have to listen to it.
I think when I came on the board, the first one I think was around 1970, 1971. There, and about the time that the board and the staff and the administrator here were planning for the nursing wing to be built. They had an area which is now in the southern part of the building where Magnolia is, called the infirmary. So people that got sick went to the infirmary if they didn't go to the hospital or stay in their room. So I think it was a pretty well a foregone conclusion that the skilled nursing was needed. Plus probably the times of other retirement communities were having nursing facilities, and it was necessary to make it something that we could keep up with the state-of-the-art in the retirement home community. I remember looking at architectural plans, engineering plans that we discussed, and particularly the cost. But I can't recall the costs of the nursing wing, other than that we were glad to get the $1 million, maybe a little more than $1 million, from the federal grant, which was arranged through Richard Hostetler, the chairman, and the congressman from the Bethlehem area. The board of directors met in the dining room. At the same time, the Women's Auxiliary had a meeting. The one thing that would never go over today is at the end of the board meeting, they had to serve the board members with a dessert that had been prepared by the dining staff at Frederick. It was always delicious pie or cake or something. We all looked forward to that. But it was served by the Women's Auxiliary. There was some building done in the front. I think that's when that new boardroom was built. And at that time, one of the discussions was whether we should keep the pillars, because with a new addition to the front, the pillars were not needed for any kind of structural support. And the pillars were kind of a trademark of Frederick, an identifiable thing that people could say, well, Frederick, you know, that's the place with the pillars. So the board somewhat reluctantly agreed to keep the pillars. I think the cost was about $80,000 to keep the pillars. But I think they've become a real trademark for Frederick to identify where Frederick is and where the front entrance is.
Duana's keeping me on task here, making sure I use the mic. So we're doing well. Okay. So we're going to move a little bit. Just to monitor time and make sure I can answer any questions. Talk to you a little bit about some other structural changes that took place. And just a reminder, there were a ton of stories out there, so I just kind of pinpointed a few. One of the big structure changes was the addition of cottages. So in 1978, the first cottage was built. You can see that. That's not its current location, but you can see that that was built. And then in 1986, 3 more cottages were built. And then in 1989, Maplewood had 4 cottages built. So when we talk about cottages, 3 more, the 1986 was 12 units. So 3 cottages, 12 units. Maplewood was 4 cottages built, ended up being 14 additional units. We're really growing at this point. So we had the skilled nursing, and now around that, 7 years later, in 1978, you start the cottages. Then the 80s, we're adding more residents. So it's building up. The need in the community is there. 1992 and 1993 was when we had a major renovation here on campus. Oak Tree Court was built, Oak Tree Center. So Oak Tree Court apartments were built during this time. So you're looking at 1992, 1993. You can see that in the back, that structure in the back. And then a little bit in front, the white building was Oak Tree Center. Included the dining room, the kitchen, and the auditorium were all added. And this project was a $10 million project. So about 20 years later, right, we go from shock at $1 million to a $10 million addition. This really moved the campus to a much larger number of residents. You had 63 apartments go in. Additionally, you can kind of see the other cottages are up, just kind of checking those pictures out a little bit. And the pond is still hanging out there, the retention pond in the back. In 2001, we had another big renovation. So if you ever wonder when our memory support was built, about 24 years ago, kind of leading edge on it. It looked like that, this picture on the left, in 2001. Looks good. If you've been over there, it's a really nice place. Aspen Village was in 2001. And then Magnolia House, the east side that we talk about, that construction actually took place in 2001 as well. That was a big year. We had a number of projects. The Aspen Village, right now, I believe it could at one point have up to 31. And right now we're trying to do, when you do memory support, you really kind of want people to have individual rooms. But when it first opened, it had about that capacity. For 31 residents, we look to make it 24 or so now, so people have their space. In 2005 and 2006, that's when the villas were constructed. There were 5 twins, 2 stories. I like the snow as well. There was a couple pictures from the 1996 blizzard. So maybe I'll share them next time, but that was kind of crazy on campus. In 2007, the portico was added to the main entrance as well. So you can kind of see that. I was wondering when that came about, because I was mostly seeing the pictures on the left when I did the research, so it wasn't to 2007 you have that portico added. 2015 to 2019, we added the meadows, which was 55 cottages. Just kind of watching that transformation again, building up, and there was a need in the community for that and a desire to come live at Frederick. That was a 4-year project. The other thing I was looking at that was interesting was that the name changed quite a bit at Frederick Living. So when it originally started, it was Mennonite Home for the Aged. Somebody in 1957 decided we got to get aged out of there. So they changed it to the Frederick Mennonite Home. That was 57. Remember, that's the big reno project too. So if you're going to give a new product, you want to kind of change that name up. We get to 1988, and we change it again to Frederick Mennonite Community. Just changing from home, that sense. I think a home as a happy place, but I think it got a negative connotation at one point to Frederick Mennonite Community. In 2011, we had another change to Frederick Living and rooted in the Mennonite heritage. And part of that was making sure people knew that we are very welcoming in terms of people of all denominations. And like we talked about, we were like that from the beginning. So, but looking at marketing and names, 2011 is when we went with Frederick Living. And then in September 1st, so 2023 is actually when we affiliated with Garden Spot Communities. That's kind of what our logo looks like now. Frederick Living, a Garden Spot Community. And so that brings us kind of to today. Like I said, I think there's so many stories out there when I was researching, but I just wanted to give you a glimpse of the history of Frederick Living and also some of the stories of the people that are still here. When I looked at the themes that stuck out to me, and many of you might be able to relate, the idea of welcoming came to mind, like friendliness, community, faith-oriented, service. Those were woven throughout the stories. Many people dedicated their lives to this community and building it, both from being of service into it to deciding to move in here. And this is where they would live out the rest of their lives. So I looked at it and thought, oh, every decision and all the people involved led us to where we are today. And it was something to be very proud of when you study it. It was a lot of people just chipping in and wanting to be part of this and knowing that it served the greater community. So that's what I have to share today. Yeah. I do have, well, one or two things. Those videos are actually available with some additional footage. Blake, since you came at, I know Richard's here too. I have a minute or two. I'd just like to show, if it's okay, the Blake's video so you can see the actual footage, because it has some different footage from that time period you don't want to miss.
1973, we got here. And of course, as a maintenance guy, we had to cut them up, grind, make hamburger, and the roaches sent away and made roast out of them. I came in one Monday morning, and there were 5 deer in the refrigerator waiting for me. So you just had to keep very busy. And I helped the middle residents with their shaving, and also help them with their baths. You know, and most of the time, men don't like showers; they like a tub bath. I learned that. And of course, the Lord gave me my beautiful wife. She's from the Sipach area, and we got married. And an amazing thing, at our wedding, I made 2 rows in the front of the church for the people from Frederick to sit to come to my wedding. It was wonderful. And of course, my wife says, I'm going to find you a job at Frederick. And she did. So she worked in dining service. But she made out very wonderful. She became a great employee at Frederick here. Well, the anniversary day, I worked a lot out in the flea market. I used to sleep out there on the blacktop, so everything would be okay. But I had to come in and do my other work as well. See, I had to dry mop the hallways, I had to wet mop the hallways, I had to do all that, do the bathrooms. I had to do all that. I remember we had to mow yard and everything. People don't realize how much yard we had to mow. And the shrubbery. I had a man that came in, and he seen I was having a problem with the shrubbery. You know, if you know what to do, it don't go too easy. He's told me what to do. He showed it to me. I had no problem. Man, I really made the shrubbery fly then. Beautiful stuff. Well, I had a wonderful staff. You make your staff, you know. The way you walk and treat your staff, it makes them what they are and what they will be, you know. And I had a wonderful staff, dedicated staff. They were very honest with me, and they respected me. We had a meeting once a month when they could come and bring the problems, the concerns to throw it out, so we should talk about it. We got to bring things out so everybody knows what's going on. And that was wonderful. That was wonderful. I didn't keep my time, really. You know, to me, it was not really a job to get paid for. It was a job of what I wanted to really do. And I remember my farewell party here. It took 3 hours for the residents to come up and say goodbye to me. And I remember this lady very well, coming up in the worship, slowly and slowly. She looked up and almost tears in her eyes. She said, Blake, I would love to give you a hug, but I can't reach you. I said, I'll come down to you. So I fell to my knees, and she gave me a big hug. What a reward. Money can't buy that. Frederick's a wonderful place. You know, to me, it's marvelous.
I am going to show you just the 2-minute clip of Richard as well, because there's some really great photographs in that. I thought it was my phone for that. I was like,
came on the board, the first one I think was around 1970, 1971. There and about the time that the board and staff and the administrator here were planning for the nursing wing to be built. They had an area which is now in the southern part of the building where Magnolia is, called the infirmary. So people that got sick went to the infirmary if they didn't go to the hospital or stay in their room. So I think it was pretty well a foregone conclusion that the skilled nursing was needed. Plus probably the times of other retirement communities were having nursing facilities, and it was necessary to make it something that we could keep up with the state-of-the-art in the retirement home community. I remember looking at architectural plans, engineering plans that we discussed, and particularly the cost. But I can't recall the costs of the nursing wing, other than that we were glad to get the $1 million, maybe a little more than $1 million, from the federal grant, which was arranged through Richard Hostetler, the chairman, and the congressman from the Bethlehem area. The board of directors met in the dining room. At the same time, the Women's Auxiliary had a meeting. The one thing that would never go over today is at the end of the board meeting, they had to serve the board members with a dessert that had been prepared by the dining staff at Frederick. It was always delicious pie or cake or something. We all looked forward to that, but it was served by the Women's Auxiliary. There was some building done in the front. I think that's when that new boardroom was built. And at that time, one of the discussions was whether we should keep the pillars, because with the new addition to the front, the pillars were not needed for any kind of structural support. And the pillars were kind of a trademark of Frederick, an identifiable thing that people could say, well, Frederick, that's the place with the pillars. So the board somewhat reluctantly agreed to keep the pillars. I think the cost was about $80,000 to keep the pillars, but I think they've become a real trademark for Frederick to identify where Frederick is and where the front entrance is.
There. I know, look at that icy picture that came. Well, that is all I have for you today, but thank you for hanging in there and watching those clips. I think that really helps when you see the person speaking and that. Got like 2 or 3 minutes. Would anyone have a question they would like to ask? I can see if I can field it, or if I was inaccurate anything, please correct me if you're an expert.
I want to know if any part of the Frederick Institute still is part of Frederick Living Building.
I'm going to have to write that one down. I do not know the answer to that. I have, is the presentation, let's see if I can just pull it up real quick. I think it's right here. From current side. I don't want to hold it up too long, but if you go back to the beginning photos, I feel like some of that structure, see that front face, is still here. So if you go to the current day, there it is, right? Behind the pillars. But I'll have to get a little bit more information, because I don't know if it's the actual material. I studied these photos a lot to try to figure out, and I wasn't 100% sure.
Would it be possible to return to some of those food prices?
It's an excellent question. I think we could if we did bring in the deer from the highways. I think we could actually lower those prices. So, I know. Aren't those photos great? I was like, oh, yeah. Here you go, Pat.
We came up here from Pittsburgh in 2002, and when we toured the building beforehand, we decided we'd come here because all of the staff, as you walked through the building, and all the residents smiled and said hello.
Yep. Yeah. Totally agree, right? Yeah, it feels like a good community, a good home. Anyone else? I can take maybe 2 or 3 more questions. Go ahead. I'll see if I got an answer. If not, I will dig.
My thought with that Frederick Institute building was, so those early years, those frail and feeble residents probably had to walk upstairs.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking? They were probably a lot younger in some ways, right? Because we're living longer. I'd be curious in 1896 what the life expectancy was. I was looking at some of the photos, and it looked like, not all though, but the population looked a little bit younger moving in here. So maybe they were able to get upstairs, but there were a lot of stairs, you're right. And in the beginning, they didn't have electricity, which is shocking to me, but that's the way it was. Yeah. There's potential. I didn't see it anywhere, but...
When did the cupola get removed? The cupola at the top, and that was an interesting feature of the original building.
Yeah. So it had to be before 1957. And there it is. We know this is 1905. Nah. So somewhere in that range of 1910 to 1957 at some point. I did not see it documented anywhere when that came down. We'll take one last question. Larry's in the back.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to have a meeting sometime and have people share how they got here or how they were led here.
Yeah.
Everybody to share, because I know how we got here.
Yeah, I think that...
Our son sort of encouraged us.
I think that's a great idea. My favorite part of this project was the storytelling. That is the best, people's stories and how they came here and how many people stayed connected through the years. And I know from my experience too, it's just a good place to be. It makes you feel good. And also that mission to serve and be part of a community has been there all along. And that's something I continue to like to be a part of. So yeah, that's a great idea, Larry. All right, thank you so much. I'll be here if you have anything else or any questions you wanted to ask me. And if I don't have an answer, we'll see if we get one. If you are interested in a part 2, we do have a lot of stories from the past 50 years or so that we could share. But if that's not something you're interested in, that's okay too. I just wanted to share. I could only share a portion today.